I want to share with you the 5 rules of fundraising from Saint Ignatius of Loyola. We all know Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, and well, I always find it fascinating how the saints started their orders. I mean, it's really challenging to build something from the ground up, and you kind of have to wonder how they do it. Well, I uncovered this really fascinating book, and it was actually called The Studies of the Spirituality of Jesuits. And what was really interesting about this book is that it didn't look at the normal spiritual side of the Jesuits, which everyone knows about. It actually looked at, the priest who wrote it, looked at the final 10 years of Saint Ignatius's life, and in particular, what he had to do to build or make sustainable the Jesuits. So today I want to share with you 5 rules that the priest shares for why Saint Ignatius was successful. Stay with me because you're really going to enjoy the last one, which is pretty much encapsulates everything. So let's go and see the 5 rules of Saint Ignatius. Saint Ignatius set himself for success. This is the preface to his rules, in that he understood his purpose in the final 10 years of his life. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to build schools, colleges, build up the education of Christians, Catholics, and to build up his order. So he had his purpose, and then he surrounded himself by the right people. He had a copywriter. He had someone who did an account of all the letters that he was sending and receiving. And he also had what I believe he had, let me just see, he had a secretary. So he had a secretary, he had all these people to help him, because in the final 10 years of his life, he actually wrote 96% of all the letters that he ever wrote in his life. 96%. Over 6,000 letters were written in these final 10 years of his life, and predominantly were about fundraising and finance. Rule number 1 of Saint Ignatius is to believe in the work that you're doing. For Saint Ignatius, this was a belief that education, colleges were essential in the proclamation of the faith. And he believed in it so much that, well, he had a vow of poverty, and he actually didn't want to accumulate any wealth at all. That's how he started. But later on in life, when he was building his colleges, his network of Jesuits, missions, and schools, he recognized that he needed money. So he actually compromised this vow of poverty in order to move his mission forward, because that's how much he believed in it. Rule number 2 for Saint Ignatius is to let your light shine. Saint Ignatius knew that the good works of the Jesuits were going to spread the news about what he was doing and his fellow Jesuits, but he also knew that he had to make it more widely known. And in order to do this, he was all about spreading the news about the work that they were doing. So he was really big on publicity, and that's why he was writing so much. He was asking all his Jesuits to as well send letters, to put things in news, articles, and so he was a big believer in getting people's attention in order for them to be inspired to donate. Rule number 3 is to know your clients and be patient. And I'm reading my blog, my article right now, so make sure to just jump over to my website, catholicfundraiser.net, so you can get the text of what I'm telling you. So what he means by knowing your clients. So Ignatius was adamant, as we know, about the vanities of life. He didn't want to accumulate wealth, but later on in life, he recognized that he needed people's money in order to build his colleges, build his order. So he kind of had to break his rule, but at the same time, he recognized the benefit of breaking his rule, and that was he could help those people with money be better Catholics. So he recognized that he had to just be patient with them and recognize, yes, it is a very difficult, accumulating a lot of wealth. It's a slippery slope because we become dependent on those things. but Saint Ignatius recognized that this was a great opportunity to evangelize to them, so to help them while they could help him. Rule number 4 is to manage your assets carefully. And now this is a really interesting rule from Saint Ignatius. I'm going to read something that he wrote. So Saint Ignatius was thoroughly impressed with merchants and business people in his time. And this is what he wrote to his fellow Jesuits. He said, "Do not ever permit the children of this world to show greater care and solicitude for the things of time than you show those of eternity. It should bring blush to your cheek to see them run to death more unhesitatingly than you to life." So what he's pretty much saying is that, Catholics, the Jesuits, they should be more passionate, running more harder, being more dedicated than the business people that he was seeing. And in fact, during St. Ignatius's time, they were calling fellow Jesuits merchants, and the zealous Jesuits, the ones that were really working hard and making a difference, they were called good merchants. So they were called this because they had to be men of knowledge, so they were going to school, getting highly educated, and so they knew about money and they knew about negotiations, and so they could manage the assets, because at the same time, St. Ignatius found that running a college, you couldn't run a college just on alms. You actually had to find some sustainable income. So with that realization, he recognized, well, we've got to learn how to sustain ourselves and not just be dependent on other people's money. Rule number 5 is to show gratitude. This is the clincher. This is the one that wraps everything up, and St. Ignatius understood it completely. And so he showed sincere gratitude to all those donations that enabled the Jesuits to do what they really wanted to do, to save souls, help people, strengthen their Catholic faith. And so he recognized that they were really, really helping him. So he never took that for granted. And so actually, chapter 4 of the Constitutions, which deals with the colleges of the society, is completely devoted to the obligation, this is really interesting, the obligation Jesuits have to pray for benefactors and the ceremonies by which they are to honor them. So St. Ignatius understood that he had to take the time and effort to be very, very thankful to people and what they were doing. So use these rules to your advantage in your fundraising and go off and be more successful with your fundraising. God bless. If you enjoyed this video on fundraising, make sure to subscribe. Right over there, it's going to be somewhere. Also, if you just enjoyed the scenic views of Catholicism in France, make sure to subscribe as well. And just follow me along on learning how to fundraise and seeing the beauty of Catholicism in the south of France. Cheers. Santé.